This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
So today, we've been touching on all this stuff related to the I-70 Strangler and then the I-70 Killer. One of the people who covered a lot of that in terms of journalism is a guy named Bob Cyphers, and we actually use him as a source. And I had to do some traveling early in 2024, and I had picked up a copy of his book, not knowing that it was just going to kind of time out this way. But we had moved on to the I-70 Killer, and he reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I'm promoting this book. Would you be interested in assisting?" So I like his work. A little bit about Bob Cyphers. He has been a news guy for a long time. And if you go read one of his bios, he's been doing this for 40 plus years. He's chased some of the biggest news stories in America. And they talk about in one of his bios, I think it's the one from Genius Book Publishing, they talk about the fact that, he's interviewed presidents and sports champions. He was on the Baby Jessica story. He covered the Michael Brown riots. He's been working in newspaper, radio, and television for a long time. For 35 years or so, he was a senior editor at KMOV TV in St. Louis. And his work related to the I-70 serial killer resulted in him winning an Edward R. Murrow Award. Bob and his wife, her name's Allison. They currently live in Normal, Illinois. And I think the tagline said something about they spend their days not chasing their grandchildren, which I thought was really awesome. And I will say that I believe that Bob has still got a good golf game going out there. I know he's ready for some warm weather to get out on the course. But I thought I would drop you into the middle of our conversation with him. He and Meg and I sat down and we talked about the I-70 Killer, and this is the result of that.
Happening right now, and anything I can do to keep this alive. This is probably going to be the last thing alive on this case. The task force has disbanded. They're not going to check back in on the 40-year mark. It's now or never. And their real hope is that this book will be out there on shelves and somebody picks it up and sees something and makes the call. They think they have a shot.
That kind of brings me to my first question. How long have you been working on this case?
I started I covered the case when it first happened. The murder in St. Charles, which was number 4 on the list of the 5 killings in May of '92. I was working in the newsroom that day and heard a call on the police scanner for a homicide call at a brand new state-of-the-art shopping center right off the highway in St. Charles, Missouri, a suburb of St. Louis. The location and the time of day and the weekend made it like, what? You got a homicide on a Sunday afternoon at 2:00 in this brand new shopping center complex? I knew there must be people everywhere out there. And so I grabbed a photographer and went out there, and sure enough, here's a homicide scene, and we stake it out. And finally, after a while, I know one of the police officers. He waves me over, and it's a young female body who was alone in the store. And I say, robbery? What's your first thought? No. I said, sexual assault? He says, no. Disgruntled boyfriend? Nope. I said, well, what's left? And he's just shaking his head at me like, we got a problem here. And so I kept on that case for a long time. And then, maybe a month or so later, once it became tied to the serial killer cases around the country, I was always interested and fascinated and kept up on it forever and ever. And then my last year, it came way before retirement, the police departments and all the cities got a task force together, and they wanted a media person to go along and tell their stories, not just one story, but keep it alive as much as possible, and asked if I wanted to go with them. And I said, sure, packed the suitcase, and we went from town to town and met police departments, family members, witnesses, friends, just trying to keep this thing alive for all those incredible people that have been suffered for so long. So I wrote a bunch of long story magazine type stories for the website at the newsroom. And then I retired. And, I thought, well, I did all I could do. And I retired just to start, I thought, well, I'll go play golf and I'll go look at the ducks on the pond. But the police departments kind of kept in touch with me. And it was like, I'm sitting here and I've got time and maybe there's something I can do to help. So I started writing and I wrote a chapter and I thought, well, maybe there's something here. And I reached out to a publisher. How many words do I need for a novel? And the publisher says, you need 50,000 words minimum. So I went back and looked at my chapter that I spent a couple weeks on writing. I had 900 words. I was a long way from 50,000. But, once I started, I was determined. The police departments were appreciative of me keeping it out there. Like I said, they think this might be the last thing ever on the shelves, the last clue that somebody might pick it up and read and find something they didn't know about and make the phone call. And I tell all the places I've gone on the media tour, how cool would it be if somebody listening to this podcast with Meg and John was the person that read something in the book they didn't know about, hadn't heard before, picked up the phone and made the phone call that led to the arrest. The FBI and Quantico will hold a news conference that day, and they'll have to invite you guys in to thank you. I really have hope this could happen.
Yeah, it's wild how that works today. That's one of our focuses. It's always been these cases that, it always feels like there's something missing. And, in this case, it's probably a family member that noticed something that was going on, or it could be someone who saw something and didn't even realize what they saw. You tell a really fascinating story that takes place over a really long period of time here. How difficult was it for you as a writer to keep up with, we're talking over 30 years. Like, how do you keep up with a case that goes that cold, but still has interest in this many jurisdictions?
Yeah, I think it was because I was there that day that I had the original interest, but then that also evolved. St. Charles, where I was the fourth killing. The first one was Indianapolis. The second one just a couple of days later in Wichita, 500 miles away. Then back to Terre Haute, and then to St. Charles. We didn't know we had a serial killer. And then I get a phone call after the St. Charles killing, maybe a week or so later. Bob, you need to come out here. I got something for you from my police officer source. I go out there, and there was no word yet of a serial killer. We just had a homicide. I thought there was some new break in the case. We get out there, and I'm told it's a serial killer. And I'm like, what? You got to realize back then, 30 years ago, this was pre-internet, basically. There wasn't much communication between police departments. In St. Charles, we didn't know about the Wichita or Terre Haute or Indianapolis murder. There was no connection. The police didn't even know. But the officer tells me we have a serial killer. And I said, well, how do you know? And he says, the ballistics all match at the scene. And I thought, wow, I've got a big story for the newscast tonight. He says, there's more. And I said, what do you mean more? He said, the ballistics are from a World War I German Navy target pistol that barely functioned back in World War I. And I'm like, what? Who chooses that for a gun on a murder spree? And so and he goes, you can't report it. And I says, well, what do you mean? He goes, you can report we have a serial killer, but you can't report about the gun. Okay, I'm certainly not going to impede the police investigation. But as the weeks then went on, and we had the serial killer thing out there, and they had a composite sketch because in Wichita there was a witness. I kept lobbying the police departments to release the information of the gun. Maybe more so than needed to. Journalistically, I felt like I didn't have the right to say it because I was told off the record, but I kept telling the police, I said, I'm not a police officer, but this seems like the biggest clue you're ever going to have. You got to get word out about that gun. I mean, somebody's going to recognize this rare gun, and that's the clue to breaking the case. Police didn't want to. My bosses knew I had something, but I wouldn't tell them what. So I'm kind of caught in the middle now. And then as I lobbied with the police departments, they started discussing it on their own. You know, should we get the gun out there? Should we not? Should we get it out? Should we not? They opted not to. I left it alone. And then I get a call, I don't know, a week or so later, Bob, we're going to go with the gun. Okay. So they put the gun out there and the killing stopped immediately. There had now been 5. After St. Charles, there was one more in Raytown. As soon as they put the gun out, it stopped.
Do you think the gun releasing that do you think that's what stopped it? Because part of the intrigue of this case is like how quickly these murders happened, right?
Yeah, I guess if you're the serial killer and police have come out and said, we know what your gun is and it's so rare, if anybody in the country sees this gun, come forward, maybe you don't use that gun anymore. So the killing stopped. And at first the police thought, and I kind of thought like, good, we did a good thing. We at least stopped the killings. If we, maybe we've lost a chance at a clue, but we stopped the killings. Well, then a year goes by and they start up again in Texas. Same thing, women off the side of the road in a strip mall, in and out. But now it's a different gun. The ballistics don't match. Is it the I-70 killer? And then the police started regretting the fact that they put the gun out there because now the gun has been changed. Had he used the same gun, they might have had more clues. So I don't know. You can argue that the gun stopped the killings for a year. You can argue that if he would have kept using the goofy gun, maybe the police would have had a better chance. But by this point in time, for me being there the first day and then me being in that debate about the gun, and now we had a serial killer, and I was kind of the media guy that was involved, I was fully invested. And then 30 years go by with nothing until the phone rings with the task force. Bob, are you still with us? Yeah, I'm still here. You got me for one more year before I go fishing for a living. And so there we were.
I got to ask. So the police, this is in your book, and it's kind of been alluded to in some of the other writing about this. The police did feel like that was a bit of a mistake to release information about the gun. That having been said, it might only be a mistake from the perspective of if these other crimes are linked to it. Right. We talk about both this series of crimes down in Texas, and then Meg and I have talked about this Terre Haute shooting that happens later. Do you think that all of these are linked?
Let's go to Texas first. Mike Crook is the original investigator on this case, page 1 of my book from Indianapolis. He's been the lead guy forever. I just saw Mike and talked to him a couple weeks ago. He's been to all the scenes at every one of those I-70 killings, and he's gone to Texas, and he says they are the same. A lot of the police department people are 50-50 on whether Texas is the same. I kind of think the ones in Dallas were the same, but here's the key. Houston, Vicki Webb. And Vicki doesn't know. I'm of the opinion that might not be the 70 killer because that guy was in there talking to Vicki in her store for like 20 minutes for starters. That's not the MO for all the other scenes. He pops in and he's out in 60 seconds. I mean, he's taking the woman to the back room shooting. He's out in a couple minutes. The fact that he would stay there for 20 minutes, Vicki described him as, weathered down, worn down look. She kept using the term jockey, whereas our best eyewitness probably in Raytown describes the suspect as a preppy looking guy, a well-dressed, charming looking guy. And as you mentioned, the killing 10 years later for Billy Brossman, if that's the connection, which I believe it is, that guy is a young, preppy looking guy. So Vicki's guy is clearly a different description. I wouldn't rule anything out, and Vicki's not. And, her story, which is part of the book toward the end, is incredible. And my pursuit of her was legendary in my career. But whether they're connected or not, I can tell you that I don't know if Texas matters in the connection because if he is or if he isn't, there's still searches there. But I do think then you go to the Brosman thing in Terre Haute 10 years later, and I think this is going to become the key. I think the police departments feel like this is their best clue. They do believe that the Brosman killer is quite possibly the I-70 killer. And if they can make that connection, they'll have something. And I think the reason that they think that is, again, you look at all the murders and killings we have around the country. If you pull in the suspect on each one and you say, why'd you do it? They've got a motive. It may be a stupid motive. It may be over, a hot dog or something, but they've got a motive. There's no motive here for the I-70 killer. He's just getting off the road, popping into a place, killing and leaving. It's the thrill of the kill. You look at that Brosman video, if you've seen the surveillance tape, and if you haven't, you really should. It's as clear of a horrific scene as you'll ever see with good video.
Yeah.
I mean, he walks to the back of the store and picks out the 6-pack of beer and comes to the cash register. And after he kills Billy Brosman, he doesn't even bother to go get his beer. It's sitting there.
Yeah.
The cash register's there, the beer's there. What would it take him? 2 seconds? He's out the door. So that was clearly a thrill of the kill, 1 mile away from the other Terre Haute thrill of the kill. And in Quantico, where I talked to the profilers, Larry Ankrum, there just are no thrill of the kill guys running around out there. You know where the thrill of the kill guys were? The I-70 killer and the Brosman killer.
Yeah.
There's no profile for the thrill of the kill. You have a homicide scene. We've all seen the shows. What do they do first? They sit there and question family members and friends and look at the money trail for suspects. There's none of that happening here. There's no family and friends to question. There's no money trail to be had. It's the thrill of the kill. And there is no profile for that, which is what makes this guy incredibly dangerous and difficult. We know why Ted Bundy killed. We know why Dahmer killed. We know why the son of Sam killed. We have no reason. We have nothing on this guy. He is completely off the rails.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Have you? I meant to ask you this. I've seen the Brosman scene video, but I've never heard it. Have you? Is there audio to that?
There is audio to that, but I have not heard it. The police have not heard it. I know that Vicki Webb said that although she could not identify his face, which again, he was there for 20 minutes, but her back was turned. He was looking out the window. She said she would never forget the voice because they talked the whole time. So she had not seen the Brosman video till I flew out to her. And we played her the Brosman video. And at first, she's just looking at it, and she does not believe. She says, Bob, I don't think that's the guy. I don't think that's the build. I don't think that's the face. I don't think that's the guy. But where I would really know is if I heard his voice. Well, at that point in time, as you read the book, you probably know that Vicki Webb had gone into hiding for 30 years before I tracked her down. I mean, she wasn't talking to anybody. I mean, she wasn't talking to, police departments didn't know where she was. So I said, Vicki, you've got to get to the FBI. You've got to have them crank up that video for you. I'm assuming they have it there. At least see if they do and see if that is a match. And I know she did that, and I know she's still talking to them. And again, though, you have to say to yourself, what stands up in court after an arrest? Oh, a woman says, I recognize that voice from 30 years ago while I was laying dying on the floor. How does a defense attorney attack that? So police departments need to have enough information for a prosecution to go forward. Prosecuting attorneys are duly elected officials. They don't want to lose their job, and they don't want to lose a high-profile case. So it's going to take more than somebody saying, I recognize the man's voice, I think, for him to get convicted.
We talk about that quite a bit, actually, about how cases a lot of times, because we're a podcast and we don't have to prove anything in court. We can have our speculative opinions. And we talk about cases that are solved but not adjudicated, that coming from the standpoint that the investigators have information, but they don't have evidence to back it up. But as far as the continuing investigation, it's not happening, right? Because they know who did it. They just can't prove it, and they don't feel like they ever will be able to prove it.
Right.
Did you ever get an inkling that that might be the case in any of these murders?
That's the inkling I have right now.
That they have a good idea of who did it and they just can't prove it?
On the Billy Brosman case, take the 70 away from Billy Brosman for right now. But on the Billy Brosman case with the security video, the camera, Terre Haute police went to the prosecuting attorney with what they thought was enough information to make an arrest on that case, based upon some witnesses who identified the killer, who they believe was the killer in the Brosman video. The prosecuting attorney looked at it and did not think he had enough to go forward. And that's his job. That's his responsibility.
Right.
So it went away. Now, they never stopped with that. And then when the connection came to the Brosman video as the potential I-70 suspect, police kept after this guy. They knew who it was. They tracked him down. They wanted a DNA swab. They eventually told him to get a warrant. They went and got a warrant. A judge signed for a warrant to get his DNA swab. They've got it. But the prosecuting attorney, in his professional opinion, did not have enough to go forward, and the case stalled, went cold, if you will.
Right. And I imagine if the investigators felt like, even though the prosecuting attorney or the DA was saying no, that makes the investigation kind of stall, because what are they supposed to do, right?
Well, I can tell you the task force has said, we'll take another look at that. If the Terre Haute prosecuting attorney won't go forward, we can look at the 70 case where crimes were committed at different other cities, and we'll see if somebody will go forward there. So those files from Terre Haute on the Brosman case are now being looked at all the other task force cities where this serial killer struck, to see if there may be enough information to tie anything in. Don't forget, we're waiting on DNA testing, every scene kept stuff. But I do believe at the end of the day, if this case is going to be solved, the person that the police departments and the task force, when I talk in the book about a suspect number one, it's the Billy Brosman killer. If this 70 case is ever going to be solved, I believe it's going to be with their ability to tie the Brosman killer into the I-70 killer. And for the Brosman killer, they have his picture on camera. Now, they show that picture in Terre Haute for weeks and weeks and weeks, and nobody comes forward. What does that tell you? It tells you he didn't live in Terre Haute.
Out of towner. Yep.
Out of towner, passing through. Nobody knows who it is. But there's a couple of interesting things on that tape if you look real close. He's wearing a wedding ring. I mean, how many serial killers are married? It's like, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, in terms of his appearance, even, he doesn't look like a guy.
No.
I'm not saying they have a look per se, but that guy looks like he just walked out of work and he's grabbing a six-pack to go chill out.
Yep. And what came forward for the witnesses that have come forward now, they have multiple witnesses who've looked at this and said, I think I know who this guy is. What's giving it away is not so much his appearance or his face or his wedding ring, it's his pants. They all talk about, we know this preppy guy that was the Brosman guy on that tape, or we knew him. The guy we knew was the one guy in a million we go out with and hang out at places that rolled his pants up real high and cuffed his pants. This guy looks like the same guy, and look at his pants. He's got the pants cuffed up just like the guy we knew. Amazing.
Yeah, that's such a weird thing to catch.
Exactly. Amazing what clue can be the clue. But, so we're hoping somebody in the book might look at that Brosman tape, might see those pants, might look at the Irma Werke goofy gun and know somebody who had that gun. There's different stories at every crime scene that might pique somebody's interest to get that one phone call.
We're seeing a lot of DNA catch killers who are deceased. Do you think this guy's still alive?
I do. I think he's still alive. I think he's still living comfortably. I think he's still in nearby one of the cities of the I-70 killers. And I think he's pushing 60 now, because this was 30 years ago. I think he was probably in his late 20s at the time. So, yeah, I think he's still alive. And as Larry Ankrum in Quantico told me, Bob, he wants to know everything out there every day if something comes public on this, which means he's probably listening to this podcast. So say hello.
That's a weird thought that we've had from time to time about covering these open cases like this. I wanted to ask you, since you were like there kind of early on, and like St. Charles is literally when this all begins. It's, even though it's later in the series, this all takes place in a month. In terms of what you've seen sort of from the inside, but also from the journalistic perspective, what is the biggest thing that has surprised you with technology that's changed?
Well, that would certainly be the DNA, because back in 92, when these killings took place, DNA was basically semen and saliva. So obviously, with him just coming in and popping some woman with a gun and leaving within a couple minutes, there was no semen, there was no saliva. Now there's what is known as touch DNA, handler DNA. And dealing with the company that's handling this down in Florida, they're telling me that, it takes time, but you never know where that match can be. So now, for example, in Wichita, the eyewitness says in Wichita, the story is a man's looking for a cummerbund. He's going to a wedding. The store closes at 6. He can't get to the store till 6:05. He calls the store and says, hey, I'm running late. Can you stay open for 5 minutes? I got to get a cummerbund. I'd appreciate it. 2 women in the store, Patricia Smith, Patricia Major, say, sure, we'll stay open for you. Come on by. Again, talk about a fateful phone call and decision that costs you your life. So at 6 o'clock, the store is supposed to be closed. And a couple minutes later, in comes a man, and they think it's the guy looking for the cummerbund. It's not. It's the killer. He kills them both. He's about to walk out the store. And now who walks in 2 minutes later? The cummerbund guy. Well, the cummerbund guy is able to talk his way out of that and get out of there quickly, but he sees that the killer has the gun wrapped in a wedding veil. Well, the police have kept that wedding veil in a bucket in a vault for 30 years, and it's been sent off for DNA. And in Terre Haute, the only time anything was ever missing from a victim when Mick McCown was killed was his wallet. Mick was the only male killed, but they think the serial killer might have thought he was a female because he had a ponytail. The name of the store was Sylvia's, but his wallet was missing. And they think perhaps the serial killer took the wallet, which meant he would have had to reach into his pants. Terre Haute police kept those pants for 30 years. So hats off to these police departments for keeping this evidence. And but now it's a matter of a DNA match, and DNA is going to improve 10 more years from now than it does even now. So they're hopeful. I mean, they got a better chance than they had 30 years ago, but still no match. Now on the DNA, they think their best chance for a match without the wedding veil matching, without the pants matching, are the shell casings. They're developing technology where DNA can track shell casings with your hand being close enough to the gun. And also, if you see a lot of these old DNA cases, they're tracking down a thing called genealogical DNA, where they can test your family members and tie it into you. So that's clearly evolving. I don't know where all that's going to go, but in Terre Haute, the detective's name is Brad Rumsey. Brad is working a cold case from 1967. So we're talking 60 years ago almost, where someone in Indiana was killed. Suspect's now 80 years old. He was 20 then, living in Florida. with new DNA, Brad's on an airplane going to Florida to interview some 80-year-old guy about, did you kill somebody when you were 20? And they've exhumed the woman's body. Her name is Joanne Fox, for testing. I mean, you're talking about, people see cold cases and say, well, that'll never get solved. Brad Rumsey's working on a story from the 1960s before we put somebody on the moon. I was in one of the crime scenes 2 weeks ago on the media tour, visiting with one of the police departments. Who pulls into town? One of the other detectives from a different city on the I-70 killings to compare notes. This is now more than 30 years after the crimes. This is 2 years after the task force has been disbanded. But I think it's a wonderful message to the public that they're still digging on these cases every day. In St. Charles, the hub of the task force, there's a woman there named Kelly Rhodes, full-time employee. She has one job every day: this case.
Yeah.
Solve this case that's 30 years old. Now you compare that to Raytown, a suburb of Kansas City. The detective there that has this case now is a young man named Chris Schraub. Raytown's had layoffs in their police department. They're really thin. They don't have the budget. Chris is chasing crimes every day. And in his office, he says, Bob, look over there in the corner. His desk is filled with all the stuff coming in from yesterday, today, tomorrow. But in the corner is this stack of files that go almost to the ceiling. And Chris is like, when am I ever going to get to that? That's the I-70 case.
Jeez.
So it exists, and the police work exists. And I'll tell you what, the police are lucky to have podcasters. They're lucky to have journalists. They need whatever help they can get.
That was one of the things I was going to ask you about with this case. You know, I've been aware of this case since it happened. I was pretty young. I remember the first spree, and I remember the Texas spree. But this case, aside from a few like sort of online spaces where it's kind of dedicated, like your Web Sleuths and some of the places on Reddit, dedicated to, you know, unresolved and unsolved crimes. This case, like, it pops in the media every now and then, but it's never gotten sort of the fancy serial killer treatment that some cases get. Do you have any idea as to why that might be?
Only because, again, they couldn't label this as anything but nutso. I remember when it first started happening along Interstate 70, as we would start traveling, we would see, you know, this was before highways had electronic signs or messages like buckle up or whatever. We would see posters on telephone poles. You'd stop and go into a gas station and there'd be some poster on the door. Have you seen this guy? Look out for this guy. That's what they had back then. So stop and think what communication was like, but before internet, before podcasts. You know, TV coverage happens for a day or two. Newspaper coverage happens for a day or two. But unless you've got something new, there's no story for the TV station or the newspaper. And I think because the motive here was so nothing, it wasn't like he was traveling around hunting down a bunch of young, pretty blonde girls and dragging them into the woods or something. It was just so random of being in and off. You know, on one hand, there's no fear like, well, he's not looking for me. I'm not the young, beautiful co-ed that Ted Bundy's chasing. But on the other hand, he could be looking for anybody. Who knows what road he's going to get off on? You know, he kills in Indiana, Missouri, and Kansas. There's another state there in between, the longest one of all to drive through, Illinois. Yeah. He never kills in Illinois. You know, he had to make stops. He had to get gas. He had to go to the bathroom. He had to get some food. I mean, it takes a few hours to get through Illinois. Did he stop? I'm sure he did. Did he look around? He might have. But they had nothing to go on. they couldn't, in Ted Bundy's case, I guess you could say, police should have been watching every sorority house or something. What are you going to watch here? It's a guy on the highway just getting off wherever he wants to. So I think because there was just so nothing to this, it was one where the public was like, boy, there's a crazy, goofy guy out there, but what's that got to do with us?
Yeah, I've always wondered if serial gun violence like this, because it's very rare that we've had like the Beltway sniper. There've been a couple of different cases where gun violence really captures the public's attention, but there's something about this case that sort of lets it slide under the radar, and I've always wondered what that was. Like Meg and I have covered cases of convenience store snatchings. There's several series of those through the years, but this one, I always thought, particularly after the Billy Brossman coverage, like when they released the surveillance video in that, I thought this one would be pretty quickly solved, and particularly if they all did string together to some degree, because I think, if I'm understanding your perspective, the initial killings in Billy Brossman are probably linked, and then some of the Texas stuff is linked where they've got like a slightly different 22 caliber gun down there. That's been my opinion on it. Like I never looked at it and went, no, that doesn't make sense. It's a weird MO to come in, brandish a weapon, walk somebody to the back of the store and put them down the way that he was killing these people. It's like you said, nutso. Like nobody does that. That part of it, it's not even. And from everything I've read and from what I've gathered from you, there's not even robbery for the motive. Not really.
Right. I guess what I would ask, because you and Meg have done so many of these, have you ever done any podcasts where there was no motive?
Yeah, we've worked a few that, like, you may not have a public motive that makes sense, but Meg always boils. I'll go ahead and let you take this, Meg.
Well, typically murder will trace back to love, money, or revenge, right? And anytime that's none of those three things come into play, clearly you could be dealing with something more, like a serial killer. Through like all the different stories we've covered over the years, we found that for the most part, serial killers, the way that their minds work, they like to strangle for the most part. They like to stab. And using a gun a lot of times takes that like personal element away from the kill, so to speak. And so this was, to me, I think part of the reason that this case gets kind of not as much attention is because it's truly horrifying. There is absolutely nothing that anybody could be doing or not be doing and end up being a victim of this person, right? The randomness of it. Yeah. And so that's scary to everybody. But as far as the motive goes, this is interesting. We have covered cases where we have to dig really hard for the motive, but most of the time we can find something. And I've tried really hard with this, digging, like, how can we link these together to somehow get this motivation? And one of the things I wanted to ask you, Bob, was having reported to the scene of the crime that day, did you play through your mind like why he picked that store or anything to that effect?
No, in fact, that's why I went in the first place. Had it, St. Louis, a large city, like many, large cities, has homicides all the time. And the sad part is, most of them don't make the news unless it's
right.
Man kills man over a drug deal gone bad is not going to be on the evening news that night. You need some kind of a hook or an angle.
Right. Not the typical motive,
yeah,
right?
As soon as I heard this location, it's the middle of the day in a brand new crowded shopping center on a beautiful spring day in the middle of the afternoon. I mean, that was just odd. Who does that? If I'm going to kill somebody, I'm going to hide behind a bush and wait till darkness comes in, and then I'm going to, do my duty and get out of there. This was different. The other thing about the St. Charles thing, when I got out there, when I was asking how do you get out? How do you get away? There's hundreds of people in this parking lot. Is there a back door? Yeah, Bob, there's a back door. Come on, let's walk back there. Guess where the back door opens up to? A golf course. So this guy's not killing somebody and running through a golf course with everybody in golf carts on a Sunday afternoon, carrying a gun. He walked in the front door and he walked out the front door into a crowd of people.
And that had to be like part of the thrill, right? Like,
exactly. So all of that,
pushing the limit.
Yes, all of that is what made it like nothing makes sense. Absolutely. This would be the last way in the world. The gun, the location, the time of day, the no robbery, everything, no boxes got checked. And when no boxes get checked, then you're right. It becomes so random, like, wow, I don't think there's somebody out there trying to kill me. I'm Megan, I'm John. I have no enemies. Somebody's trying to kill me. Oh, wait, this guy who doesn't even know I exist, he might be trying to kill me. That's about what this was.
And it's like almost terroristic, right? I mean, it would put fear in anybody that, had anything to do with any of the victims, like, oh, I shop in stores or I work in a store off of I-70 or whatever. And so it becomes this like thing that we have to block out of our minds almost, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And again, at that time, police called they figured the guy had, what's the vehicle? The people at first thought, well, he must be a truck driver. He went from Indiana to Wichita in 2 days. He must be a truck driver. Well, the first killing scene is at a Payless shoe store that's got like 5 parking spots in front of a little store, and connected to the store, literally separated by 10 or 15 feet. You can walk it in 10 seconds, is a Speedway gas station. So think about all the people in the middle of the day, that are coming into the Speedway gas station nonstop. You weren't using credit cards as much back then to pay for gas. You had to walk into the store and pay for the gas. Everybody coming and going, and this killing occurs 10 steps away. Well, where's the getaway car? There's no parking spots at the Payless store for a semi-rig. So that's
right.
Then police are thinking, I had one of the officers tell me, Bob, he may have stopped and put the gas into his car and started pumping and walked next door and killed her and came back and got the pump out and left. That's how bizarre it could be. So he, in St. Charles, he's not walking through the golf course. At Indianapolis, he's got the gas station right next to him. And in Raytown, where we have the one best eyewitness, the killer's looking right into his video store. He's face to face with him. The killer's looking over his shoulder and behind, and obviously decides, oh, it's a man. I'm not going in there. And he goes out of frame. And then 2 minutes later, the guy at the video store hears the pop, pop, pop next door, runs next door to the building connected to his at the strip mall, and sees the woman laying there dead, and sees the same guy that was looking at him in his window running up a hill. There's no car. He's running up a hill to get away. So the gun, the car, the time of day, the no robbery, all these things, when police start putting their brains together, it's like, take everything we ever learned about tracking down a homicide case and throw it in the garbage can. Because nothing with this guy makes any sense for how you would do it. Okay? You don't kill a woman and then run up a hill to get away. You don't kill a woman and have a golf course to get away. You don't kill a woman with the gas station pumping right next door. Nothing made sense at any of the scenes.
I do think, though, that that could be part of this case that's been so hard for me is like, I haven't seen the thrill kill for serial killers with guns very much, right? But I think that you're onto something with that, like pushing the limits as far, like he had to run up the hill. And so he's almost like putting more and more obstacles in his own way. Like seeing maybe that did something for him as far as like, oh, let me see if I can make it even harder for me to get away and still get away.
Very interesting. Or the next step to that be? Is he taunting or playing with the police? Like you say, Meg, let me go a little bit further into the deep end every time to see if they can even come close to catching me. That's interesting.
Yeah.
In Wichita, the officer who has this case now is a man named Tim Ralph. He's also the officer who this is his second serial killer case. Tim caught the BTK killer. And Tim was a young man when the BTK killer struck in Wichita. That crime span lasted like almost 20 years, I think. And Tim was a young kid in school when the BTK killer first struck and killed a family literally down the street from where he lived, killed a family of 4. And Tim had to walk to school every day by that house. And Tim would say how he's kind of, haunted him his whole life. Just being on the lookout because the killings kept happening in Wichita, in his town. They never stopped. Tim always had the BTK killer, like a fear of it.
It was like an imprint on him.
Tim winds up going to college. Guess what? Majors in criminology. Guess what? Winds up getting a job at the Wichita Police Department. Guys retire. And guess what? Case lands on Tim's desk. The BTK killer.
Yeah.
And the BTK killer is playing games with the police, just like Zodiac was.
Yeah.
I love that movie. The BTK killer is doing little classified ads with police like Madonna was in Desperately Seeking Susan, little coded messages. And finally, Tim's communicating with him in the classifieds of the Wichita Eagle under some crazy name. And finally, the BTK killer writes to the police, hey, I'm tired of this little classified thing. Let's take it to the next level. Like Meg's talking about, take it to the next level. How about I send you a floppy disk and tell you where the next killing is going to be? This BTK killer because he liked being called the serial killer. He used to leave clues in a cereal box on a highway. He would put a cereal box on a highway. Some car would have to stop. And in the box, sticking out like a flag would be an index card or something saying where his latest homicide victim's body could be found. Again, playing a sicko game. So Tim Ralph at the police department says, yes, send me the CD disc. BTK killer, Dennis Rader, sends him the disc. Tim takes it to his forensic lab. Where could it come from? It had to come from a church. They go to the church to see who would have had access to the computer system there. The only person who did was a church deacon named Dennis Rader. Tim started going through notes. They had one eyewitness who'd seen a car flee from one of the cereal boxes, said they saw the person who dropped the box was in an SUV. Tim gets a name and an address for this Dennis Rader at the deacon of the church, goes to the house, and what's he see parked in the driveway? The black Chevy Trailblazer. Imagine what Tim Ralph is feeling right now. And the next day, Tim has the SWAT team there. They arrest Rader. They handcuff him, put him in the back seat of the squad car, and who's driving him to the cop shop? Tim Ralph. So it took almost 20 years, but they got him. But just like Meg said, they got him because he made a mistake. He was playing with the cops.
Right. And if he hadn't have done that, it's unlikely. I mean, possibly at some point, DNA might have revealed him somehow.
Nope.
But without his need to engage, right? Because that's pretty much what he was doing. He was satisfying his need to have attention, right?
So the I-70 killer, either he disappears after killing 6 people in a month in 92, or, as Meg alludes to, he wants more and he comes back in Texas, try to catch me now, different gun. And then wait, 10 years later, here's Billy Brossman. Does it take years to go by to get the thrill of the kill if they are connected? But I do think that's an interesting point. We can't describe what his motive is, but as Meg mentions, part of his motive, running up a hill at a gas station, at a golf course, middle of the day, part of his motive has to be catch me if you can.
Yeah, he's He's different in that regard for a number of reasons. I can't imagine that type of thrill killer like having a secondary set of operations. Like there are killers that do 2 things or 3 things, but like this guy doesn't really fit that. It's been a little frustrating to try and track him. I'm sure law enforcement has pulled their hair out over this one.
Yeah, I mentioned they called all those hotel people. They called 65,000, I think, people who were at hotels in that month in all these different cities. And one of the guys they had to call to say, "What's your alibi? Where were you?" And it was Kevin Costner. Like Kevin's probably thinking, "Is this heaven?" No, it's Wichita. So they check campgrounds. They haven't ruled out the semi-truck thing, but where's he got it parked? And I went to all these scenes and I kept saying, where's the getaway vehicle? If I'm the killer, where am I parking my car? He's not. Then, Mike Crook, the original cop, thought maybe he's a hitchhiker. I don't know. You're killing somebody and then you're going to go stand on the highway and put your thumb out?
Yeah, that would be too iffy, I think.
Yeah, because now you're bringing in another person that could be a witness or describe you later on. So, no, I think he had to have wheels somewhere. And so where? I mean, at a couple of these scenes, there were neighborhoods behind the locations. I think he could have parked the car in a neighborhood, a side street, and knew he was only going to be there a half an hour and then walked not a far distance. But not in St. Charles. There's no parking. He had to walk out their front door into the main parking lot. So
yeah, about a month ago, I had everything spread out on a map, and this is ahead of getting a copy of your book. And when I was spreading it out on the map, I was like trying to figure out bus schedules. I mean, that's how far I went with but then you got this gun, and I know it's not a huge gun, but like you've got a gun nonetheless. And it's going to be something weird that he was doing vehicle wise. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And I've gotten a lot into getaway vehicles over the years, and killers will do all sorts of weird stuff and walk all sorts of distances when they're focused on doing a thing. Bank robbers too. That's another one that we've gotten into. Bank robbers do weird stuff with vehicles. They'll trade license plates and then go back and trade them back. All sorts of stuff. But this guy, I could not catch any, like you said, there's a golf course behind one location. One neighborhood had like an apartment complex right behind one of the locations. I mean, even with Billy Brossman's killing, that's taking place not too far from where Mick's killing took place at Sylvia's. And yeah, and that always that throws me off because then he's coming back to an area, whereas before he was going miles apart. And I've always wondered if there were killings that were linked in here that we don't know about because they were written off as a robbery or a one-off or, carjacking or something.
Please tell me they checked that pretty thoroughly. They kept seeing what else could there be, and they couldn't find anything else. Even off of 70, they would search, were there any other, let me see every homicide on your books. Was there anything that was out of the ordinary that wasn't a rape, wasn't a rob? And they couldn't find anything. Everything else had a motive. Nothing else was like these.
I was going to ask you a few more questions as we wrap up. The first one was, do you think we're going to get a resolution out of this one from maybe the DNA or some of the work that's being done right now?
I do, and the reason I say that is because of the diligence of what I'm seeing happening. Like I said, I was at one of the towns 2 weeks ago, and here comes another cop. I know I've met all these police department people. In Terre Haute, Brad Rumsey, the lead detective, has retired, okay? And I played golf with Brad a little while ago, and Brad looks at me and says, I'm retired, but I'm really not retired on this one.
Yeah.
Mike Crook retired years ago, and I saw him a couple weeks ago, and Mike Crook is like, Mike, do you keep up on this case? He goes, you mean like every day? I have a lot of faith in these detectives. I have faith in DNA changing. They've got new people that are still coming forward as we speak as they're pushing out this Brossman video to people. One of the stories in the book that wasn't out in the public, there's some new things in the book, and one of the stories that wasn't out there was about this in Indianapolis, this Florida Cadillac that comes pulling up to a construction site, man and woman in the car. And the man gets out and goes to the construction foreman and says, "Hey, you got any job here? I'm looking for work." And the foreman says, "Yeah, let's go on down to my office here. We'll get you an application." They all get back in their two separate cars, and the foreman looks in his rearview mirror and sees a woman in the car with the man who stopped, passing him a gun. Well, now the foreman gets concerned and he tries to speed up and lose the car. He wants to get away. The car's following him. It's kind of a fast speed chase. Now he's concerned. He's able to get in the woods somewhere or somewhere off the beaten path and hide the car. He's lost them. And he hears all these cops going by, all these sirens. And he's thinking, oh man, they're after this guy. They're after this guy. No, they were heading to the Payless shoe store where the serial killer struck for the first time apparently minutes earlier. So now the question is, this guy, the construction guy, doesn't even report the crime. Years go by and he thinks, well, that happened to me. You should have seen that. Then years go by and he hears about this serial killing and he hears about the dates. He goes back and looks at his records or the date, and then he goes and tells the cops about this. And the cops are saying, could you recognize the gun? And the foreman says, yeah, I'm kind of like a gun connoisseur. I could recognize that gun in the middle of the day. So the cops bring him in and lay out a bunch of guns for him on the table, thinking there's no way in the world he's going to point to the Irma Werke World War I gun. And he points right to it. And I asked the police, do you think he was credible? He absolutely 100%. So again, maybe one of our listeners has heard that phrase, Irma Werke. Somebody knows somebody who has an Irma Werke gun. Can only be a few of them in the world. Where'd they get that gun? It had to have been a family heirloom or something passed along. But that phrase has to ring in somebody's mind. And now on the Brosman video, they've had more people come forward. And so they're going after that Brosman video. And they're going to make an arrest, I believe, at some point on the Brosman case. And they're going to go forward there and they're going to press that guy, that suspect, in some sort of deal making. Tell us about I-70. That's their hope. That's their hope right now.
In the video, do you think that the video being released is what sort of put why there's not more?
The Brosman video?
Yeah.
You mean why there's not more killings?
Right.
Or you're asking me to go into the mind of a madman now, Meg.
Well, I know.
You do that to John all the time?
Yeah, well, no,
Yes.
actually, we feel like it's like, I'm sure you feel the same way. It's like a point of pride that like we can't quite get there,
Yeah.
because we aren't mad serial killers running around. But I think that, because that was in 2001. And so the technology, while not like it is today in 2024, it would have been significantly more than, in the early 90s, right?
Yeah.
And so like maybe, he flew too close to the sun and he realized, I don't know in space and time, like how soon the video was released after the murder was committed.
I think it was close. I do think you're onto something there, though, where in 92, obviously, there was nothing as far as security. There was little bells that would ring at your door when a customer walked in.
Right, exactly. And maybe he didn't realize how much of himself he was exposing.
Right. So then ask yourself then, okay, 10 years later for Billy Brosman, does he know or does he suspect that there's a security camera at the convenience store? Would he have even looked around to look up? There's a camera up there. Did he see it and not care? The other thing about that is after he kills Billy Brosman, he does a little celebratory jig dance, just adding insult to the scene.
It's real. Yeah, I've watched the video. It's really terrible.
But you're onto a good point. Did he get too close, or did he know there was a camera there? I mean, it's 10 years later, so a lot of places had cameras. A lot of places had, if you're going to go rob a bank today, guess what? Your picture
You're going to be on camera, right?
It's not a surprise. And
And
did he know there was a camera there? I don't know.
I think the timing, I think he could have, I know that in the early 2000s, it wouldn't be uncommon for there to be the presence of cameras and like the corporate or the clerks or whoever else, they really didn't have access to the footage, and it was really there more as a visual deterrent, right?
Yeah. And,
And
in Quantico, the FBI people have told me, although it's scary, that there are probably, off the top of my head, I think they said, Bob, there's probably 200 to 300 serial killers walking around the country right now. And by serial killers, they don't mean somebody that's killed two people because they didn't like them. They just mean somebody that's killed multiple people at different places for whatever.
right.
But that number is less than there used to be by a great percentage, because the serial killers, even if they have no motive, have sharpened up and realized there's cameras everywhere. The DNA has advanced. It's not as easy. You don't see as many hitchhikers on the road today as you used to when you were kids. People, it's a different world, and people are just more secure. Everybody has a cell phone now. They know what 911 is. So there are less serial killers. Technology has helped that. But still, if you think there's 200 or 300 of them walking around, what are you going to
That's
do about
horrifying.
that? Yeah.
Right. Well, the chances of them getting away with it are way less now, and it is because of the avalanche of DNA coming, especially with the genetic genealogy, because that exposure, like, it amplifies everything. You don't have to put your DNA in the system, right? One of your relatives could have done it.
Right.
And they're going to track it back to you. And then, the circumstantial evidence has to sort of add up. And then you've got, some investigators getting your trash, right, to see if you're a match. And we've talked about that quite a bit on the show. And I got the feeling I really enjoyed reading your book. And I got the feeling from reading the book, for one thing, you did a really good job kind of bringing, like, while it does happen in a short time span, it's a lot, but you brought it all together in a very smooth story. And I think that will help tremendously in jarring anybody's memory that might possibly have, anything to add to this. Because I do think if, without the DNA or without the gun, possibly, I think the gun could be really key, but it could be the random person that remembers something, and bringing it all together like that is going to enhance everyone's ability to do that, right?
Yep.
If
they still have to go to court. They have to prove a case to a jury that's 30 years old with sharp defense attorneys. I always wanted to serve on a jury one day and never had a chance. And being a journalist, I felt like I'd always get struck. But about 10 years ago, I got selected for jury duty. I show up. It becomes a murder trial. I get selected. I become the foreman of the jury, of course. And so I sat through there. And I can tell you, from these 12 random people that are in a juror's room, and this was a murder case, but it wasn't 30 years old, what I kept hearing from people is, I want the smoking gun. I want the proof. Before I go guilty, I need to be beyond a shadow of a doubt. You're talking about eyewitnesses from 30 years ago. Is that a shadow of a doubt? You're talking about, somebody who thinks they saw something 30 years ago. Is that a shadow of a doubt? It's going to be hard to get the smoking gun here. It's going to be hard.
I think that now, I don't know why the Billy Brosnan, I don't know why the prosecutor would say, like, it's not enough, because to me the video evidence is very convincing, and I don't know, it seems like you could tell if that's the person on the video or not, right, regardless of it being from 2001. And and so that makes it a little iffy to me.
I think the answer to that is, at that point in time, 20 years ago for Brosnan, they had witnesses come forward who again, like I said, they used to run with a guy who had his cuffs pants like that.
So it wasn't quite enough.
who looked kind of like, and they had multiple people saying the same thing. But again, what's a defense attorney going to tell a jury about that? You're trying to get a murder charge on
Right. It's just not my guy. It was a coincidence.
Yeah, on somebody who cuffed their pants.
I can see where that, wouldn't fly. And if you don't have anything else, even if it is circumstantial, I can see where it would be really hard to prosecute. Not to mention the DA doesn't want to miss, like you said earlier. They don't want to, take the shot and not convict the person, right? Because they lack the evidence.
And I think that may be something as a society we should probably look at, because these district attorneys, or these prosecuting attorneys, these are elected positions. And
correct.
They don't want to get, the minute you get the job, you want to get reelected. I got to tell you, in my work at my work for CBS for 30 years, I dealt with politicians on all sides of the aisle. And in this political world we live in, people ask me all the time, hey, did you ever meet this person, that person? Yeah. What do you think? I tell them the same thing. 99% of these politicians, the minute they get elected, they have one thought in mind: how do I get reelected? And that's it. It's the same thing for these prosecuting attorneys. They want to keep their job. We all want to keep their job. If your job security is based on wins and losses like a baseball game, and you charge Billy Brossman on this big case, and you got surveillance video and you lose,
you're not getting reelected.
No, your opponent's going to tear you apart in the next election. So I think the problem is prosecutors don't want to go forward unless they've got a 90% chance. And I think that's probably a problem. Maybe these prosecuting attorneys should not be up for public election. Maybe they should be appointed somehow. I don't know. I'm just saying the fact that they won't take cases because they think they're going to lose the high profile. I get it. I understand. You got a wife and a family to feed. I understand.
Well, right. And I feel like, especially with, cases that are 20 to 30 years out. I mean, because obviously by now, even if they hadn't released the gun information, shortly after it happened, it would have been released by now, right? Because we're talking about a string of murders that's still unsolved, right? There's no point in holding anything back really at this point if it means solving it. And so I don't know where the balance is for, especially elected officials. I understand that they have a completely different prerogative sometimes. But there's got to be a balance between, these, especially if it is a case that in the minds of the investigators, it's solved, but it's not adjudicated. It might possibly never be adjudicated if there's not additional information from DNA, for example. But where's the line where you're going to have to, maybe if the DA was going to retire and not run again, they could go out on it. So it wouldn't matter if they lost. That might be a solution.
Yep. Now you're talking term limits. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, though, you guys got to consider, I say this coming from a defense perspective, for the prosecutor, once they throw out a good, decent prosecution in a multi-jurisdiction case like this, and they try and get somebody on it, what they've done is create reasonable doubt for the future. If they screw up and it's not the guy, you might not get the next guy.
Yeah.
And that's a problem too.
Yeah.
Well, and if it's at the point where somebody thinks that that could happen, I don't disagree with not going forward. I don't think that's what's happening here. I think that it's probably pretty straightforward, just with the, typical gumshoe detective work that would have been done on, basically a non-robbery liquor store robbery where someone was murdered in 2001 and there's video footage. I feel like there's no reason that case wouldn't be solved. Right? I mean, taking everything else out of the equation. And so to me, there has to be, some reason that, it hasn't gone forward. And I imagine, I don't know if it helps or hurts the situation for, trying to link all the I-70 cases together. I'm not sure. But to me, like, that is just the type of case that I can't imagine there being a wall up that prevented investigators from solving it. And it doesn't sound like there was. It sounds like there was a prosecutor who said, we don't have enough. And so that's two different things, right?
Yeah, and I think the prosecutor in Terre Haute, in his defense, did not have enough in 2002 or whenever the Brosman case happened. Let's just say, though, that in the last 20 years, the police departments and the task force think that their best chance is the Brosman tape for a connection or the DNA. And the DNA has not made a match yet, but they have the suspect's DNA on subpoena in case they ever do. They're waiting on that. So what do while they're waiting on that? They're back on Brosman. And let's just say maybe they only had a couple witnesses on the Brosman tape in 2002. 20 years have gone by. What if they have more witnesses now? What if they have 5, 6, 7, 8 witnesses for Brosman? What if one of their witnesses that has come forward was the woman with the man in the car from Florida at the construction site? You can put a lot of what ifs in here to say they would have more now than they had then. Now, I can't tell you because I don't know everything about this, but I can tell you they have more now than they had then on Brosman. And as they wait for DNA and they go after the Brosman tape, that's the ball game right now. There really is no other ball game happening. The ball game they think should happen is what Meg mentioned. It's the Irma Workey gun. Somebody should recognize that and say, pick up the phone around the country. If we could reach 300 million people right now and say, has anybody ever heard of this or somebody that had this? Somebody has. Please call the police. That's what they're hoping on, but they've not got that phone call. So they wait on DNA and they keep attacking the Brosman video.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I have you talked a little bit about interacting with law enforcement here, but you did a tremendous amount of work talking to victims of some of the attempted cases and some of the family and friends here. I'm just curious what kind of toll that took on you personally.
In my work, in my world of covering stories over time, highs and lows. I've had the chance to meet and be in the same room with a half a dozen presidents, sports teams, championship teams, interesting movie stars, but also families who've dealt with horrendous things, children who've been murdered, and just horrific things. In this particular case, though, I'll give you a couple of quick examples. In Terre Haute, the two family members that were still there were sisters Cynthia Brack and Teresa Lee. And when I went there to talk to them, I think it was Cynthia that said, well, Bob, me and Teresa aren't as close as we used to be. Time has gone by and, we still get along, but we're, it's just, this has had such a toll on our family. And that day I'm interviewing, I respected that. And when they came, they drove a long way to come and meet me. I kept them in kind of different parts of the parking lot. And afterwards, though, I brought them all together for a prayer for Mick as we left. And as I left, I looked and I saw them kind of laughing and giggling and talking. And I thought, you know what? Today, I helped bring them together. And I felt wonderful about that. And then we go to Wichita. Mark Majors is the husband of one of the victims, and a woman named Ruth Feather was a friend of the other victim. They didn't know each other. And this killing took place 30 years ago. And again, I brought both of these two people just on fate together, who I could find. And as we're leaving, you couldn't separate them. They were just talking nonstop and telling stories. Again, they didn't know each other, but boy, they're catching up on 30 years and old stories. It was impossible not to smile. As sad as it was impossible not to smile. But then I go to Raytown, and where Sarah Blessing was killed, with the video store right next door. And I interviewed the video store manager, Tim Hickman, and 30 years later, he can't talk to me without crying. Bob, it's in my mind every night. I see this guy all the time. I mean, he had such a hard problem. He kept saying, if I would have acted fast enough. What do you mean fast enough, Tim? He's in your window 1 minute, and the next minute later, you're hearing gunshots. And he's so broken up. And meanwhile, as we're in Raytown, we're pulling away to leave, and the guy comes up to us in a car and says, you're here from the TV station. And I'm saying, yeah. I go, how'd you know? I heard about it on Facebook. Oh, okay, well, fine. And he goes, and he's like hanging around, and I'm thinking, oh, he wants to meet the TV reporter or whatever. And I'm being nice to him. Hi, where are you from? And he's ready to go. And he says, out of the blue, he says, I was here that day. And I said, what? He said, I was here that day at a killing. I'd gone through all the police files. I said, who are you? I can't tell you my name. I said, well, forget it. He goes, no, I was here. And I said, well, have you talked to the police? No, I'm too afraid to come forward. This is 30 years later. He's afraid to come forward. And again, he got so shook up and shaking, I realized he wasn't just looking for his 15 minutes of fame with a TV news reporter. He had a hard time also telling his story, but he did. And I put him in touch with the police departments, and maybe something happens there. But in all these places, just the absolute heartbreak of these people. The cop that works the St. Charles case was a man named Pat McCarrick. And Pat also went down to Texas when the killings occurred there. And a woman at one of the Texas sites that was killed was named Amy Vess. And as Amy was shot and laying dying, she managed to crawl to a telephone and call 911. And there's a call recording of her about 30 seconds where she's begging for an ambulance to come help her. Mm-hmm. And I asked Pat about, do you ever think about, moving on from this? It's 30 years old. You're now retired like Mike Crook. Go play golf, whatever. Pat pulls out his drawer and has a tape in there. It's of Amy Vess in Texas. Pat's the police detective in St. Charles. He plays the tape of Amy Vess in Texas over and over of the woman dying. And he says, you think I'm going to give up on this? I mean, just amazing detectives, amazing family and friends and victims. That's what I wrote the book for. It wasn't for me to make a penny on this case. I could care less. What an absolute thrill it would be for me after the career I've had of all the things, and I've done a lot of stuff, but for me to say that I helped catch this killer and help these families and these detectives, that'd be the best thing I ever did.
So I want to be able to point people to the best place to get your book so that they can read more about the story. The book is Dead End Inside the I-70 Killings.
Well, I'll tell you where not to go get it, because that's what I said on television last week when they were saying, where do you get your book? And I'm rattling off anywhere: Amazon, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Target, any website. And then for some reason I say Toys R Us. And we stop and laugh. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. I think Toys R Us has been out of business for a half a dozen years. And also, I think when Toys R Us was in business, they weren't stocking their shelves with serial killer books. So
probably not.
You can find it anywhere. You know what I've also found interesting, though, about books, and this is my first time going through. Actually, this is not the first book I wrote. As soon as I retired, I started writing Christian faith books. I wanted to write some books about my faith. And but I've realized as I go searching for those books or what websites they're on, if you write a book, it's on any website around the globe. You type in the title of my book, and it's on websites in Japan and China and Yugoslavia and Outer Mongolia, but you have to search for it. Now, here's my question. So who in Outer Mongolia in the search bar is typing in Bob Cyphers? Or who's typing in Dead End Inside the Hunt for a Serial Killer? So although it's on, when you say, where can I find it? The answer is every book site in the world. But you gotta, in most cases, you've got to type in a search bar window. On Amazon, though, which I guess is the main one right now, I know the book publisher Genius is really happy. The book is in the top, I don't know how many of new releases for real crime or whatever. It's done really well. It's only been out for a couple weeks, so. Again, it's not the matter of the sales for me. It's the matter of solving the case. But boy, do I want to get the word out. Do I want somebody to read it and know something about the Irma Werke case or been at one of these scenes? Oh boy, do I. I'd give anything for that.
Yeah, I'm going to throw the I-70 hotline in here because it was in the book, and I kept it just to make sure that I put it on here in case people have it. It'll be in the show notes. And that is 1-800-800-3510,
Yep.
3510.
Yep.
And you can call in there if you happen to know anything about the gun, the killings that we've mentioned in this series. And my last question, well, I actually have two last questions. Do you have any pets?
Do I?
Yeah, are you like a dog, cat, gerbil guy?
Dog lover my whole life, but now in retirement, we've lost our last doggy, Coco, and the wife at this age for us says we're not going down that road, at least right now. So I'm hoping in the back of my mind she changes her mind at some point, but for right now, I'm going cold turkey.
Oh man, that's got to be hard.
Yep.
And my last question is there anything we didn't cover today that you feel like is important for people to know about yourself, the book, the I-70 cases, any of that?
Nothing about Bob. I'm just a regular guy. But I would say one more thing about these cases when we talk. Meg brought it up about fate. In most of these cases, the victims were not even supposed to be at work that day. At Indianapolis, a coworker called in sick. And so Robin Fuldauer took her shift. At Terre Haute, Mick McCown had a chiropractor. Woke up and his back was hurting. He went to the chiropractor, and the chiropractor said, stay home for a couple days. Mick thought about it, went home, and then decided to go into work. In St. Charles, Nancy Kitzmiller was not supposed to work that day, but a friend wanted the day off and asked if she could switch, and she did. And in Raytown, Sarah Blessing had just opened that store with 5 friends. They had a grand opening 3 weeks earlier, and they just rotated days. Monday, if somebody had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I think they all came in on Saturday. And it was just Sarah's day. So the fate of these things, for just the victims even showing up at those buildings, and then the fate, the randomness of the killer deciding to stop at those stores instead of the stores next door. Just heartbreaking.
That means that every single location had a piece like that because the bridal shop was closed.
The bridal shop was closed. Had the Cumberbund man not been running late for his wedding, they would have closed and gone home. It's just, had he picked a different store, a different wedding, well, I'm not sure there was, but every one of them had a what if story that families are left to live with forever.
Well, I just want to say thank you for coming on and thank you for letting us interview you. These stories have been really important to us. The series is a big deal. Thanks for writing about it because, you know, your pieces along the way have both been sources and pointed us to other sources to be able to tell a story. Okay. And I greatly appreciate that. Do you have anything else for Bob, Meg?
Well, I was just going to add, I feel like the synergy here is definitely present for us because I don't know what the statistics on it are, but I mean, what are the chances that his book was going to be coming out right when we were getting to the I-70 serial killer? We had like a whole lead up to it, which, you know, a lot of the stuff we led up with because we were talking about the I-70 strangler, which is, you know, a completely different story. But and I found all that to be sort of mind-boggling, and that's why we wanted to break it down and go through like how, you know, there are different things that sound very similar, especially in mainstream media, but you mentioning the fate of all the, tragically, all the victims that we've talked about and that their stories are told in your book. And I feel like it was kismet that it all worked out this way, because it's something that I really hope can be solved. And I have a lot, and your book gave me a lot of hope for that in kind of getting the bigger picture. So I'm glad that we were able to kind of fit it in. Actually, it went very smoothly into our schedule for this year. And I'm glad that we were able to have you on and put it out there, help you get the story out there.
Well, I thank you both. Anything I can do for the detectives and families, I will do. If I can ever help you in the future, and boy, I'll tell you what, if I'm in contact with the police departments throughout the weeks, if I get some new nugget of information or something new that I think can help you or that you might be interested in or you need me back or whatever, I will let you know, I promise.
Thank you so much for listening today. We'll see you next time.
This is True Crime XS.
All right, so I'm going to tell you guys a few things about some of the folks who are helping sponsor our show. Now, Labrati Creations sponsors our show, and you can always use the Crime XS code there. You can also just message them at Labrati Creations, and they will generally do something for the people who come from True Crime XS. They were our very first sponsor. They've done a lot for the show, and that code is CrimeXS at LabratiCreations.com. The first new advertisers that we have, and I've selected all of these guys. I've selected all of these advertisers. So the very first one is Cure. Now, I'm going to tell you guys about this, about Cure as being one of our sponsors. If you're an athlete, you know that proper hydration is key to peak performance, but plain water can be boring and sports drinks can be filled with artificial ingredients and added sugars. That's why we love Cure. It's a clean and effective way to stay hydrated and perform at your best. I use it late in the day when I switch out of caffeine mode. Specifically, when I hit the pool or I go play tennis with my wife, I use Cure to help me stay hydrated. It helps me recover after a long day. Now, you guys may not know this, but I build things. Right now, I've been building several structures on our property out here. Among those is a new podcast studio space for myself. I do a lot of that work at night and into the wee hours, and I always have some Cure with me to go into my aluminum water bottle. Hydration is not just about filling up my aluminum bottle with water. Cure Hydration is an oral rehydration solution that contains the perfect balance of electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb water and rehydrate quickly. Whether I'm building things or putting the podcast together or chasing these dogs that you sometimes hear in my studio up and down the trails to get them worn out, Cure Hydration is the way that I choose to go. Cure Hydration is an oral rehydration solution, or an ORS, that contains the perfect balance of electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb water and to rehydrate quickly. The formula is made with all natural ingredients like coconut water powder and pink Himalayan salt. It's free from artificial flavors, from sweeteners, and preservatives. Cure Hydration is vegan, gluten-free, and non-GMO, making it a great option for anyone with dietary restrictions or preferences. The packets are convenient and easy to use. You just mix them with your water and you drink. They're perfect for on the go. They're perfect for travel. And anytime you need a quick and effective hydration boost, ready to combat dehydration, then you try Cure today and feel the difference for yourself. You can use code TrueCrimeXS for 20% off your order. That's TrueCrimeXS. I have a link that I'm putting in the most recent episode show notes, and True Crime XS will get you 20% off. Our second sponsor for the show today is Laird. Now, Laird has a list of things that they want me to tell you about. They have better ingredients with amazing taste and functional benefits. They have a superfood creamer crafted from the highest quality, all-natural, real food ingredients. All Laird products are sustainably sourced and thoroughly tested to ensure that you're incorporating the cleanest, finest fuel into your routine. They have all natural whole food ingredients, and they contain naturally occurring MCTs made from coconut oil. There's no artificial flavors, there's no colors or additives, and there's no sugar from highly refined corn syrup. They want me to talk about my love of coffee, but the truth is, I don't do much with coffee. But let me tell you someone who does. My wife has to have a cup of coffee every day. Now, I've fallen off recently, but one of the big things that I've done since the beginning of our relationship is she used to go and get a Starbucks every morning. I have substituted that out by always trying to make her coffee. It's not going to be every single day of time from when I met her, but for the most part, almost every day, I make her coffee. I put her creamers together and I make sure that she has a good way to start her day. So with Laird, he started experimenting with his morning ritual almost 2 decades ago. He found that when he started adding fats to his morning cup, like coconut oil, he had amazing energy throughout the rest of his day. He gradually perfected this recipe for an epic cup of fuel, and he began sharing it with his friends in the surf community. I'm an ocean guy, so I saw this item and I was like, okay, we're going to try this one out. Are you ready to feel more energized, more focused, and supported? Go to lairdsuperfood.com and add nourishing plant-based foods to fuel you from sunrise to sunset. And you can use our promo code at checkout to save 15% off your purchase today. Our offer code for this for Laird is going to be True Crime XS. Pretty much everywhere except for Labarde Creations, if you use True Crime XS, that will get you, at Laird, it'll get you 15% off. At some of the other places, they'll get you 20% off. I'm going to tell you about 2 more sponsors today. So the first one is, the third one is Liquid IV. So let's talk about the real reasons that you need to hydrate. Late night TV binging, back-to-back Zoom meetings, going on a walk with your friends. Everyday hydration is not just for high energy athletic endeavors. Liquid IV is the #1 powdered hydration brand in America. It's now available in sugar-free. This is years in the making, but Hydration Multiplier Sugar-Free uses a proprietary zero-sugar hydration solution with no artificial sweeteners. It's got 3 times the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, but it's also got 8 vitamins and nutrients for everyday wellness. Liquid IV hydrates 2 times faster than water alone. Keep your daily routine exciting with 3 new flavors. They've got white peach, green grape, and lemon lime. I love all of these flavors, but I think that my favorite is probably the green grape. White peach I use as a secondary flavor, and lemon lime I leave here for my kids and my wife. Liquid IV believes that equitable access to clean and abundant water is the foundation of a healthier world. They also partner with leading organizations to fund and foster innovative solutions that help communities protect both their water and their futures. To date, Liquid IV has donated over 39 million servings in 50 plus countries around the world. You can get 20% off when you grab your Liquid IV Hydration Multiplier sugar-free or any other variant at liquidiv.com and use code TrueCrimeXS at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code TrueCrimeXS at liquidiv.com. And the last sponsor I want to tell you about is Zencastr. We are part of Zencastr's creative network. We've been using Zencastr since about midway into our first season. Meg and I experimented with a lot of different ways to put the podcast together. And the truth is, Zencastr was an integral ingredient to us being able to bring you this show. It's so easy. It's now super easy. You can record a podcast with Zencastr. You can log in using your browser and you start recording a high quality podcast right away. You can record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guest. You get to feel a sense of zen, knowing that Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you will always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. You sound your best. I mean, if you've ever worried about what you sound like, Zencastr's post-production process makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes those ums and ahs in your recordings. It removes those awkward pauses in conversation too. You can set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with a click of a button. That's how you don't hear my dogs every second of every episode. Zencastr is all in one. If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are now over. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place, and you can distribute to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations. Just go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code TrueCrimeXS, and you're going to get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. You can also check out the other plans they have available. I want you to have the same easy experiences that I do for all my podcasting and content needs. So zencastr.com/pricing. The offer code is TrueCrimeXS, and it's time for you to share your story today. We are also adding New Era as a sponsor for the show. New Era Cap is a headwear and apparel brand founded in 1920 in Buffalo, New York. Now, I actually have some experience with New Era caps. My dad and I have been through multiple iterations of baseball caps through the years. We collect different styles, different eras, and now my teenager has started his own cap collection and has several New Eras as the centerpieces. Our favorite teams may not be the same, but our outfits are all topped with the same New Era ball caps. We love the quality and the ability to wear what the players are wearing. Not to mention, New Era is the leading headwear manufacturer with quality licensed products. You can support your favorite college or pro team in style, from the official headwear provider for the MLB, NFL, and NBA. You can get a stylish accessory for your everyday ensemble and support True Crime XS. Just shop the official headwear and get 15% off when you go to neweracap.com. That's neweracap.com/TrueCrimeXS. You can also use the code TrueCrimeXS at checkout. That's it. That's all you have to do. And that's 15% off your order using the promo code TrueCrimeXS.